Hello, today we are going to discuss what are the problems that can come in the code that you have generated via vibe coding or AI, you can say. So in this video earlier I have covered that how in 15 minutes you can create a framework, right? But it could take 15 minutes but to create a framework, but it can take 5 hours or days to fully test it because there are so many things that gets created, right? So you have to validate all of that. So after creating it, I did a little bit of testing, trying to make it fully work. So I'll share my all those learnings and what are the mistakes that I did. Right, earlier we discussed the mistakes that were done by while creating a Selenium framework. Right, this time we are going to discuss the REST API related framework mistakes that were done by AI. So let's begin. So if you're coming first time to my channel, do subscribe to it. And on my GitHub repo, you will find both of these frameworks, right? You can feel free to use by forking it, right? So this one is Selenium framework and this one is Rest Assured. So both of them I have created by just giving some prompts. I have not written any code in this, right? And what is the framework or prompt I used? So that is there in this prompt library. You can go to gauravkhurana.in and then come to AI and you'll find the prompt library and this video. So give them a try. So to find out the problems, what I did is, so first problem that it came is that tests were running fine locally, but when it ran in the pipeline, if you see the first check-in I did, right, it was quite a few time ago, but it was a failure, right? So what are these things that I applied? A lot of fixes, right? I did not applied, like I did not change the code myself. I asked AI only, but yeah, it took some time and I'll share all those things with you. So the first thing is that it uses some old versions of some of the actions, right? In CI/CD, it has used version 3, right? And then it gave me error and it upgraded version 4, right? So that's a problem also with AI, that firstly it will give you a lower version, and when you tell the problem, then it will try to find a higher version or tell you the reason why it is giving you this error, right? So this kind of problem can happen. So you should be aware about this problem. Now moving on, other thing is that it sometimes does not understand the context properly, right? So what happened is, in my system for Docker, Java version 11 was configured, right? And elsewhere, right, some places it has added version 17. So that problem was also happening. So for that, we can probably give our context better or tell it, right? Because sometimes if it is not checking, we can add these things in Copilot instructions file as well, right? Which I have talked about in the previous videos as well, right? So other thing is, since this was the REST framework, right? I was using REST Assured library, right? Which works with Java for automating APIs, right? So initially it added the version as 4.5.1. Right, then there were some problems coming, so it updated to, or I think I checked manually what is the version, and we upgraded to 5.3.2. Right, so here this is the same thing which I was talking earlier, right? So old libraries sometimes it use, and later on I'll show you that how the latest also did not work, right? So that was the interesting thing, that it's not that whenever something latest come that then you should use it, because it might not work for you. I'll show you all of this in VS Code as well, right? So it used Lombok library, right? And there was a particular way that it has to be used, right? So it added this to avoid the failures, right? And then, like, though we said that you should have the error handling, right, try and catch block, so it did not add it at all the places later on when problems were coming in the CI, right, when we were running in the pipeline. So it added all of this code which was not there earlier, right? So on testing these things, we were able to know about this, right? So yeah, this is also one of the important thing. So I asked it, like, it added a test called as connectivity test to check that whether the API is up or not, right? Instead of running 100 tests on a URL, right? Let's say the URL is down, right? So you are wasting, maybe if one test take 1 minute, 100 minutes, right? Which is equivalent to some cost. You will be charged some dollars, right? When you run your pipelines. at the enterprise level, right? I'm not talking about on GitHub, which is free for personal use, right? So what it did was earlier, it has added the code without using my own code, right? So we have to instruct that it should use your own code base, the things which are already there. We need not to create stuff again and again, right? Like for example, it added config manager before also. All these things are present in base test, right? So if it would have used that, right, we assume that okay, it might have used everywhere, but you should test for this, right? Moving on. Yeah, this was one of the major blunders that it did, right? So it has assumed that, right? So sometimes what happens is our environment in different for different environments, our URLs, like you add QA in front of it, right? For prod it has added this, but for dev it added this a proper URL, right? So what happened is when I tested, dev environment was working all well, but when I was trying this prod environment that we created, if you see here, this was not working, not even QA was working, right? So when I analyzed the code, I found that it has not added this URL, right? So sometimes we have to also check that, right? It has used a little intelligence to think that okay, QA will come here, because QA can come somewhere else as well, right? Based on what things you are following in your project, right? So it did this mistake, right, which we have to be sure about, right? Don't just trust that code blindly, right? So again, here the example of try catch is there, right? And some of the options, right, because of the multiple failures it was happening, it added this. And like, since build was failing on each test failure, right, test failure should not maybe stop the build in some cases, right? So it added these flags as well, right, based on whatever I was giving instruction, right? So if you see here, because some things were different in the CI, so it has to add a code there so that the test should run in CI and in local as well, right? So you must be using in your frameworks where for CI generally you give headless as true, right? Because in pipeline we don't mostly run in the headless mode, right? So these are the few things, right, that you should be aware about. And let me show you in Visual Studio Code as well, right, where we have done all of this. You can check the previous video if you are not aware about it, right? So what happens is, in this, you see on the top right, there is an option called as show chats, right? So it shows me the history. So if you see, I have first created the framework and then all these chats are there to add more things, right? So if you see here, our bonus things part of this framework, right? So we gave some bonus things in the prompt, but all of them are not included as part of it, right? So I asked it to create all those things, right? Those things which were missing, right? But let me show you from the some of the things from the starting, that what it did. Right, so here if you see, multiple problems were coming, right? So I have shared the same problems which were coming, right, because of the different versions of Java. So if I show you here, you can clearly see that it has used version 3 earlier, right, which I showed you that it has to be version 4. And then it gave another error which I pasted, and then it changed the version, right? It was telling that pom.xml is having Java 11, right? Whereas like in the YAML file or other files, the version was mentioned as 17, right? So it updated that because it was trying to run, and in the end it gives you that what all things it has did, right? Let me show you some other errors. So what happened is, since it was not running, so it has created multiple GitHub files, right? So in a project, I think when you just want only one pipeline, right, one was enough. So it found that okay, there are three, so it has removed some of the file, right? For example, the CI simple and API test, right? So it can do the comparison and it can make it better, right? So, and it tells you step by step that what all things it did, right? So it took me some time to make everything working. Plus the bonus features were not added as of now, right? So I added those features as well. So some of them are there in the repo, right? So my advice is that please do test whatever code you are creating via AI, right? It can create in 15 minutes, but making it fully work, testing it properly, like adding some new APIs, will give you the actual idea that till what level it has reached, right? So do subscribe to my channel, and you can open gauravkhurana.in. It's a simple way to remember stuff, because all my GitHub and YouTube, all the links are there on this page, right? So any feedback you have and any problems you have found out, do share that in case I missed anything. So thank you so much for watching.